Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Infernus, and welcome back to another comic book review. After teasing this possibility so long ago, we are finally heading into the New York City sewers and reviewing something from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, specifically the new, now not so new movie, Mutant Mayhem. And I'll be honest, I was actually really looking forward to this movie. I grew up on the 2012 show on Nickelodeon, which is unanimously loved. Awesome. That show's great. And then this started getting a lot of praise, and that was a major green flag for me. I cannot believe I just said that. Then I go watch it, and this movie is honestly a little frustrating for me. I can absolutely see why people love it, but there's a certain aspect that definitely brought it down for me. It's something that's completely subjective, and I'll get to it when we get to the cons. So let's start out with what I liked about the movie. The stuff where I can absolutely see why this movie is loved by so many people. For one thing, this movie is trying to put the teenage back in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is, it's a fair idea because oftentimes they don't really focus on that. It's kind of easy to forget outside of the way they talk. It's kind of easy to forget that they're teenagers. Like, they focus on the mutant Ninja Turtles, not so much the teenagers. Here they are very much teenagers. They yearn for acceptance and independence, and they do jack all when they're bored. That watermelon scene from the trailers is a prime example of what I mean. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of fun to be had with having them actually act like teenagers. Unfortunately, they use that in the wrong sense, but we'll get to that. But I find that they also do a nice amount of stuff with Splinter, where due to a past trauma, he has a hatred for the humans above. So the only time he ever lets the boys get out that much is, well, just to get groceries, and then they just do jack all anyways. But by the end of the movie, he learns to let them go and let them have their own independence. It's not the first time we've seen something like that. The Little Mermaid did something like this like 40 years ago at this point. Jeez, I wasn't even alive then, and I still feel old. But it is a nice little arc that they give to the father figure. The villain as well, Superfly, which to my knowledge is an original villain. The only fly that they even had in the past versions was Baxter Stockman, and boy, do I have a decent thing to say about him. But I do like how they tied his backstory with with his creation and the creation of the other mutants into the creation of the turtles. How, in a sense, the events that led to his hatred of the humans also led to the creation of our protagonists. It's a very genius way to tie the heroes and villains stories into each other. And while they don't do a lot with the other villains, which, well, not other villains, I'd say, but other mutants, which kind of sucks because you have characters in there like Bebop, Rocksteady, and Mondo Gecko, staples of the franchise at this point. They don't do a lot with those characters, but what they do with them is a pretty neat little twist. And the last thing I will say here is that the cast is really good, especially when you have actors like Seth Rogen, John Cena, Paul Rudd. That one surprised me. He's actually great. And even Ice Cube as Superfly. Like, I know that guy's a rapper and all, but seriously, if ever he decides to stop rapping, he could go into acting. He's a good actor. I mean, we already knew that thanks to The Book of Life, another great movie. But here, I think this is definitely another great example of how talented he is as an actor. And of course, we can't forget Jackie Chan as Splinter. That was a genius casting. Speaking of genius castings, if we can just talk about my only real objective flaw with the movie, they wasted this movie's best casting. Giancarlo Esposito as Baxter Stockman, when they revealed the cast for this movie, that was the one that blew me away because why has no one else done this? Why wasn't this guy the guy playing Baxter Stockman in Out of the Shadows? Probably because that movie's not that great from what I hear. But seriously, if they do another live action movie of the Turtles and Baxter Stockman's in it, they need to cast Giancarlo. He just gives off so many Baxter Stockman vibes. I admittedly haven't seen him in much. I've only really seen him in clips from Breaking Bad and The Boys, two shows that I have not watched. But from what I've seen, he does give off the kind of unsettling scientist sort of, energy, even though to my knowledge he's not a scientist in either of those shows. But he feels like he'd be a great pick for this role. And unfortunately, in the actual movie, he's only in the opening scene. Why would you waste such perfect casting? Just, I don't know. That was just so disappointing to me. Anyways, now we get into the subjective stuff. Just going to put a disclaimer here. Feel free to take this next part with as much salt as you wish. No one else's review that I've seen of this movie has really complained about it. I'm sure Animat complained about it, but I stopped watching that guy back in June. So yeah, feel free to take this part with a grain of salt. Now, I said earlier, at least I think I did, that putting Teenage back in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it kind of came back to bite the movie in the ass. And what I mean by that is that this movie and the characters uses a lot of modern slang and pop culture references, which, yeah, the Turtles tend to use slang and all that. They have like the dude and bruh and radical, cowabunga, goongala. Okay, maybe not that last one. That's more of a Casey Jones thing. You get what I mean. They have their own language and rhetoric that they've used throughout the franchise, but that's something that's a staple of the Turtles. Here, they're using a bunch of modern terms and referencing a bunch of modern things that for the most part aren't really going to be cool for like 2 years. I'm willing to bet that in 2 years Among Us isn't even going to be that big a thing. So saying sus is going to feel weird in a movie like this. And there are even times where they're in a fight scene, and because there's no talking, they'll just say a reference. It feels weird and it's jarring, and it pulled me out of the experience. Normally I'd say it pulls you out of the experience, but let's be clear here, this is most likely just a me thing. And while I get that that's part of putting teenage back in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I have no clue why that was so hard to say. I get that. But whereas they feel like teenagers in the other incarnations with the whole slang and such, here it feels less like them being teenagers and more like adults trying to appeal to the youths. Or bullies who are trying way too hard to be your friend by appealing to your interests. I can speak from personal experience on that one. And, maybe this isn't that big of an issue. Maybe this is something that's completely ignorable. Oh, wait, this happens every 3 minutes. Yeah, that's probably why it was such a big issue for me. Here and there, it probably wouldn't have been as bad. I'd, roll my eyes, just groan a little bit, but it wouldn't pull me out of the experience. But when stuff like this is happening every 3 minutes, you get cringy reference after cringy reference. It just constantly pulled me out of the experience. And yeah, it made the movie tedious to sit through. Like, that's not a word that I was hoping to use to describe this movie, but the movie is definitely a tedious watch, at least for me. So yeah, in general, this was probably one of my biggest disappointments of the year. There's a lot of good to talk about here. There's a lot of good things that the movie has going for it. Whether you're talking about, the boys and the journey they go on, Splinter's arc, the villains, the cast, even the animation. I didn't even talk about the animation. It's beautiful, and the fight scenes are incredibly fun to watch. But the movie is just trying way too hard to be cool. Like, that's how I describe this. It's trying way too hard to be cool. It feels less like them being teenagers and more like, hey, this thing you like, we like that thing. We're cool, right? No. You're pulling me out of the experience here. You're not cool. If you want to be cool, act like the damn Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Just be the Ninja Turtles. They are inherently cool. They've been inherently cool for like 4 decades at this point. Less than that, but you get the point. Please, just stop trying to be so cool. You're not cool. You literally have, that meme where it's like the principal with the skateboard and it's like, what's up, my fellow kids? That's the energy that this movie kept giving off every 3 minutes. So while I was hoping to give this movie a higher score, with how it just kept pulling me out of the experience, it's going to have to be a 2.5 for this one. Definitely a big disappointment. Not a bad movie by any means. And I'm sure a rewatch could allow me to do a complete 180 on the movie. I'm sure once this comes out on home media, I could watch this again and I'd go from being disappointed with it to loving it. Or maybe not, who knows. But hey, I'd still recommend seeing it if you haven't already. I don't even know if it's still in theaters. This video took so long to come out. But regardless, I'd still recommend seeing it because chances are this won't be an issue with you guys. This is purely a me thing because of that experience I mentioned earlier. But your mileage may vary. That's probably the best way I'd use to describe this. That's probably the best term I'd use to describe this movie. Your mileage may vary. Anyways, guys, that's going to be it for my review of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. If you enjoyed, you know what to do. I'm not going to bore you with all the generic stuff. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, and Godspeed.